was off or whether they're meaningful in themselves, because I don't have it.
Sure, why don't we take a minute to do that?
All right. So this is for stonework.
Okay.
And we're estimating 24 person hours at $15 an hour.
Okay.
And a gallon of gas at $3.50. Quarter gallon of gas for equipment. 5 cubic yards of mulch. 15% is overhead for our administrative costs and
Okay, but is that a direct cost?
no.
So we're only looking at direct costs right now.
Okay. And then we added a 20% materials markup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. So, and what is the unit that you guys decided to?
We did, our unit was person hours plus materials.
So you're doing
Plus the markups.
Okay. So, okay, great. So, in this case, what I would probably do is, man, it's a little complicated because for you guys and also for the organization, so there's going to be a lot of different kinds of things that you do. So, doing a cost of goods for time, it might be better to just do 2 sheets, one for time and one for materials. If you're going to do all your jobs, time and materials, it might work better to do it that way, because then you'll be able to get a consistent picture. So on your time, you might say consistently, your unit might be per hour, right? And you might say we always charge the customer $30 an hour, and we always pay us $15 an hour, right? So you always have your income and expenses associated with that unit. Okay, so your unit is an hour of labor. That's your time. And then for materials, if you have a consistent markup of 20% on materials, then that pretty much is your gross profit right there, right? So if you buy $10 worth of materials, you mark it up by 20%, which means you charge your customer $12. So does everybody know what I mean by markup? So in the same way that you guys spend $1.70 or $2.70 on your labor and materials to charge your customer. So you're marking it up by that extra amount. If you're marking it up by 20%, then that pretty much is your gross profit. So I would just maybe do 1 sheet for time and 1 sheet for materials.
So is our profit, we don't count indirect as profit, right? So that's not profit.
Right now we're just looking at gross profit, right? So we're going to do gross profit, and then after we're done with gross profit, then we're going to look at our overhead expenses, because that's a whole nother ballgame.
So our profit is entirely in the materials markup?
No. So we're only talking right now about gross profit. So we have gross profit and net profit, right?
Right.
Gross profit is what's left after you pay your direct expenses, right?
Right.
So yeah, that 20% markup would be the gross profit on materials.
Right.
And then the gross profit on your labor would be the markup on your labor in dollars for every hour that you work.
But there's a markup on our labor?
Yeah, maybe I'm getting kind of confusing, but okay. So if you guys pay yourselves $15 an hour and you charge your customers $30 an hour, how much do you think you're marking up your labor?
50%. We were just charging our customers what we charge the $15 an hour for labor plus materials. So we're doing that wrong.
Okay.
Regardless of whether you're marking up your labor and your materials, if you mark up your labor and materials, that's not going to be a direct cost. That amount's just going to be counted in your gross profit, right?
Sorry, now you lose me. Alright, let's stick together here. Say it again.
So if you're increasing the amount, so if you get paid $15 an hour and you're charging them $20 an hour.
No, we're charging them $15.
I know.
Right, but you're saying
So let's use an example you would actually do. If you're marking up your materials 20%,
Yeah.
you're going to include that in your gross. That results in a higher gross profit, not in a higher direct expense. So you're not counting that 20% markup as a direct expense.
Okay. The 20% markup is your gross profit. So if you spend $10 on materials, if you spend $10 on materials, right? You mark it up by 20%, which means you charge your customer how much? $12. Everybody see that? Because $2 is 20% of $10, right? You add it to the 10, you get 12. So you charge your customer $12 for those materials. You pay the store $10, and what's your gross profit? $2, right? And two,
20%.
Will go towards the gas and transportation costs and stuff like that?
right. So that's almost right, but there's a little bit of a mathematical thing in there, but that's just about right. What you're saying is that you're not marking up your labor at all, you're only marking up materials?
Right, but I see that the person who did this worksheet did mark up labor. We have not been.
Because
We've been charging.
if you don't mark up your labor,
Yeah.
then all you have to like pay for your business expenses and your capital costs is that 20% for materials. So you're
Yeah.
leaving your business at a
We
lot of
have,
risk.
we have 15% indirect costs that we were using to pay the business. 15% on top of whatever the,
So your labor markup is 15%.
Okay.
yeah, I guess that's right. But it will, I
Okay,
think of
so
that as
that's part of your
administrative.
pricing. Okay, I see what you mean. So when you would price out a job, okay, so when you tell your customer how much the job's gonna cost, what would you tell them? You give them a whole price,
We'd give them a whole price.
and it's gonna say materials plus 20%, labor at $15 plus 15% overhead.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right. So in that case, you're pricing it by the job, and that's fine. That means, okay. So that means essentially that 15% that you're marking that up. You're right. That would then be your gross profit on labor, right? And then the 20% on materials is your gross profit on materials.
Okay.
I don't think it's enough money to run your company on. Typically, that kind of a business, a construction business or a landscaping business, marks up your labor by 100%. So if you're getting paid $15, you charge your customer $30. That's typical.
And also, isn't there a trap of miscalculating how long a job's gonna take? I mean, what's the buffer
Right.
there?
That's exactly right. Because when you're doing, that's the difference between charging by the job and charging by the hour. So if you tell your customer, we're gonna do the work that you asked for, we're gonna do it at $15 an hour, it's gonna take as many hours as it takes.
Yes.
And we can't even tell you how many hours that's gonna take. That's honest, but the customer might not like that. They're gonna want you to say how many hours is this.
How many days?
So if you commit to a contract price, and you sign with them and say, we're gonna take 10 hours to get this done, you're gonna pay us $150 in labor. If you don't get it done in 10 hours, you still have to finish the project,
Right.
and you're not getting paid for those hours now.
But wouldn't that come from experience too? And that type of work, you could pretty much estimate the time it's gonna take to do an average job if you experience in that particular field.
Yeah, and so this is one reason that I would really encourage you to keep good records, right?
Yeah.
The only way you're gonna be able to estimate this stuff in the future is if you write down
Prior.
stuff like that. If you say stuff like, okay, we built a stone wall 10 feet long, 2 feet high, out of a certain kind of stone. We know that it was a 10-foot wall. We know that it took us 10 hours to do. That means it's an hour per foot that we did, right? Over time, you average those together and you're gonna know. Every time we build this kind of stone wall, it takes us about an hour a foot to do it. So when you go out and do an estimate for somebody, you can look back in your records and say, okay, it took us about an hour a foot to do that. This one's 20 feet. I'm gonna put down 20 hours.
Yeah, we are doing that for stonework, actually. But, so if we charge by the hour, then the 15% makes sense?
I think you're gonna get a better picture once we figure out your overhead expenses too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're gonna wanna probably go back and revise these numbers after we work out your overhead stuff. So that'll be the next thing. So I'm gonna move on. Matt, the future focus?
Yeah, future focus well, last week we had started by thinking of our unit as being 1 hour of work, and that didn't really work out. Similar to diggers, we usually give a quote for the job, right?
Yeah.
So we picked one job as like a 10-hour to make video, right? probably a 5-minute video that took us a couple hours to film and a bunch of hours to edit and make a DVD and stuff. So we didn't have a lot of cost of goods. It was only about $5 per video, and we had quite a bit of labor costs on it, but we still had about $310 gross profit, and so our margin on that is 62% per video, which seems really high, but I know we have a lot of overhead because we have a lot of equipment and things like
Doesn't seem
that.
high to me. So these gross profit numbers, they're going to be different for every business, and there's really no saying what it's going to be. You just have to know if it's right for your business. I can say in the businesses that I've worked for over the years, it's usually over 30%. It's typically 50 or 60%. So it's like kind of in that area, So I'd say if your gross profit percentage is under 30%, then you want to be a little careful. But if it's in the 50 to 60% range, I think you're probably in pretty healthy territory. But it all depends on your industry.
And how many units you sell, right?
This should be per unit. The gross profit should be the same per unit. So the percentage should be the same, right? So if you have, your target anyway, of course in real life it isn't going to be that way. But your target is you make the same gross profit percent on every unit. That's why we talk about these units. Yeah.
Aren't there some types of industries though, especially where you're largely charging for your own skilled labor, where your profit margin might decrease with the size of the job and the quantity that someone orders? But you're sell more.
Only if you change your pricing.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. So it's like
Yeah.
if we charge this much for 4 bottles of hot sauce, but if
That's
we buy
true.
100, we're not gonna
Well,
offer
Yeah,
that.
you could give people discounts for large volumes and stuff. That's
Right.
true. That would
So
that
like
would
an
change that.
economy of scale, I mean, if you're doing a larger volume, then you're probably getting a discount on materials that go into
Could
it.
be.
And maybe you're able to streamline the operation with some equipment that you couldn't afford before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be your goal to try and get that number as big as you can, Is everybody clear on the concept?